Strength to seek what we believe in, humility to accept the combined decisions of others, patience, good humour at all times, tolerance and courtesy while working in the best interests of our community. Welcome along, everybody. It's a cool day out there, so it's actually quite nice to be inside. We have no apologies. We do have an apology. No, we have no. We do. Lateness. We do, we don't, we do. Thank you, Team Leader. We have apologies for lateness from Councillor Wayne Walker and Paul Young. I'll move that we accept those apologies. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Filipaina. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Electronic attendance. We have requests for electronic attendance from Councillors Christine Fletcher, Daniel Newman, Efessor Collins, Greg Sayers and John Watson. I'll move that electronic attendance under Standing Order 3.3.3 be approved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Simpson. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Are there any declarations of interest from any councillors for today's meeting? If not, there are no petitions, public input, local board input, and I know of no extraordinary items. Councillor Young. So we come to the first of four substantive papers. We've got the Tupuna Monga Authority operational plan. We've got the the adoption of the revenue and financing policy, the adoption of the recovery budget and rate setting. As you'll all be aware, these have all been debated, they've been workshopped and they've been voted on before, principally on the 25th of May. So today is more of a formal procedure to formally approve these documents. So item number 8, if I can ask Dominic Wilson and Nick Turoa to come forward, please, to talk to the Tupuna Monga Authority operational plan and the 10-year budget. And I'll ask Councillor Filipaina, would you move? And Councillor Dalton second. And now invite, is it Dominic, are you leading off today?
Yes,
the floor
please.
is yours.
Well, tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā te mihi kia koutou. So yes, every year you see us before you in relation to the operational plan, and you're probably all well aware that the operational plan is agreed both by the Tupuna Monga Authority and the Auckland Council. It's a matter of how it's agreed through the legislation. So in the paper, it sets out the consultation that's been run, and just the highlight really for that is that consultation was run through the Auckland Council process as per usual, but also the Tupuna Monga Authority runs its own process, a separate independent one. And generally what we found is that the authorities one is more targeted, with perhaps fewer people and groups responding, but they're normally longer and more detailed and more targeted responses. And then the Auckland Council's one is a general, much more general, and gives a wider snapshot of the wider population. Following on from the consultation, the matters raised didn't raise anything that management saw a need for amendment in the draft operational plan, and then that came before you as in a hui with the Tupuna Monga Authority to discuss that. And so today the operational plan and the summary of the plan are before you, are ready for your consideration and agreement. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Dominic. Nick, anything that you want to add to that? Are there any questions? Are there any comments? Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tēnā korua and tēnā koutou katoa te whānau Tupuna Monga Authority. Look, Your Worship, I just wanted to acknowledge the fact, one, the members on the Tupuna Monga Authority, the Chair, our mana whenua, but more in particular our staff. Just very briefly, everything's been outlined in the agenda item, but Your Worship and councillors, the work, that our Tupuna Maunga Authority team under Nick and what we're going through in regards to a lot of the work on our maunga needs to be acknowledged. And I say to our team, thank you so much. Please pass it on to them, because we all know the issues that all of us are facing around the management plan. But this operational plan will be key to achieving what I know will be beneficial for our whānau across Tamaki Makaurau. So ngā mihi kia koutou katoa, and please pass it on to our whānau at the operationals. Tēnā koe, te rangatira, koro matua.
Thank you very much. Nick and Dominic, because we're now into commentary section, you're welcome to withdraw from the table. Questions? Do we have any other comments? If not, I'd just like to thank all of the members, both councillors and members of the authority, for the work that they have done on the maunga. They are absolutely part of the taonga of Tamaki Makaurau, and any of us that have actually been on the maunga in recent times will have seen some significant improvements from sometimes the rather dilapidated state that they were in the past. I think that's really important. We acknowledge the ownership of the maunga by the mana whenua, but we also acknowledge that these are being held in perpetuity for the enjoyment of all tangata whenua and all Aucklanders, and we're blessed as a city to have the maunga there for our enjoyment, our recreation, and it's great to see the restoration that is taking place. So the motion is to agree.
Your Worship, sorry, look, I just want to acknowledge Sandra in regards to our recommendation and the use of whakai. That needs to be acknowledged, because I think the more we get into the use of Māori in our recommendations, the more commonplace and everything else. But the use of that is, I know, Sandra, want to acknowledge in regards to that, because I think it's so important for us moving forward around Te Reo. Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora.
Worship, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor. So that was very timely. There is another comment from Councillor Wayne Walker.
So just want to make a comment, Mr Mayor, and I can't say that I've been particularly involved with the operational plan, but certainly my observation, having visited some of the maunga, is that there are trees that are on some of these maunga that are quite outstanding. They may not be natives, but some of them are very old and are of substantial proportions, and are also contributing significantly to the environment, storing carbon, providing a place for birds and the like. And I do make the observation that it is very disappointing that some of these trees be removed early in their lives. And I would just urge other councillors to visit some of these locations and appreciate the magnitude of when some of these trees are removed, because they are, as it stands, very significant in terms of the vegetation in some of these areas.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Richard Hills.
Kia ora, thank you, Mayor. Just want to briefly say just congratulations again to the Te Puna Maunga Authority, the amazing work you're doing, the fact that you are going to and are already underway in making all the maunga places of urban ngahere that were like they were many, many years ago. The fact you've restored the mauri of the maunga in my hood already. Removal of the cars going up Takaronga was controversial for a small amount of time, but has actually created an amazing space up there. The birds and the breathable air and the safety of people. There are more people visiting maunga on the North Shore than ever before, and that is now with the vehicles removed. there's still access for those who can't make it up by foot or by wheels. But also the fact, and many people would have seen it during the America's Cup in the amazing work you had going on there with the events and the kapahaka and the storytelling, but also the fact you've restored some of the more Pākehā related or World War I and II related artifacts and made the tunnels safer and done things like that. So I think many people were quite happy to see the restoration of what was, long, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the natural formation of the pā sites, but also you're restoring some of the World War artifacts and tunnels and things like that as well, that people were being able to see it all work and link together. So I just want to say that you're bringing the biodiversity back to our maunga is so important for our climate, and I'm seeing it rapidly change. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Linda Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I just want to reflect on this and how it must have been for the iwi when European came and we started stripping all the maunga of all the foal, everything, including the wildlife where they got their food. And the grief and despair that would have caused, as well as it started a cycle of poverty, not being able to look after yourself and actually forage for your own food. And there was no plan to reforest. This is the other way. Yes, there will be grief and there will be upset, but at least there's a plan to reforest it, where there wasn't when our foremothers and fathers did it. And so I think at least there's some way of repairing what the perception that it's destruction, and hopefully it'll bring back some of the native birds that it was natural for them to feed on the native trees, where it wasn't so natural for them to feed on things like akmina. So it's a cycle of change, and I think it's good. It helps stop erosion on those maunga as well, and we'll have them for longer. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. So the motion is to whakai the operational plan and summary, and to include the summary in the 10-year budget. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. We come now to item number 9 on the agenda, which is the adoption of the revenue and financing policy. If I can ask Aaron Matich and Andrew Duncan to come forward. I will move this motion, ask Councillor Simpson to second it. And basically what we're doing here, this is a statutory document that is needed to give effect to the decisions that we actually make in item number 11. So it's about the funding principles, depreciation, the funding sources, the uniform annual general charge, rates differentials, targeted rates, and fees and charges. So, Andrew, you're going to introduce this item?
Good morning. This report recommends you adopt amendments to the revenue and financing policy. These are technical changes that were consulted on alongside the other funding decisions you consulted with the community on that are reflected in the recovery budget. They also reflect decisions that you'll later make on the adoption of the rates for the year, also included in the recovery budget. It's technical amendments, procedural to implement the long-term plan recovery budget.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Are there any questions? Are there any comments?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I had a question. Councillor Watson.
I'm sorry, Councillor Watson, please ask your question.
Yes, thank you. And it is a process question, Mr. Mayor. It really goes to identifying what item, whether it's this one or item 11, the rate setting, that essentially gives approval to the urban rating proposal in terms of those transitional payments. That does occur at item 11. I'm assuming that's the appropriate time to talk or make a vote on that particular item as it was progressed through the long-term plan. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. It's item A2, it's recommendation A2 on item 11 on our agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no comments, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I declare it carried. We come now to the key item on the agenda today, which is the adoption of our recovery budget. I just note here, well, first of all, I'll ask Kylie Thompson and Ross Tucker. They're already here. Welcome to Kylie and to Ross. I'll move this motion. I'll ask Councillor Simpson to second it. We voted for the recovery budget on the 25th of May, and both at the Finance and Performance meeting and the governing body. And we did this following 156 hours of workshops and committee meetings. So the time for amending the budget is now past. There is a comment on it is still possible, but this is actually the formal approval of the final document, and that will occur following the Office of the Attorney General presenting their opinion on the LTP. But Kylie, I'll ask you to lead off and quickly to outline the item.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora i te whānau. Today you're being asked to adopt our recovery budget, which is our 10-year budget 2021 to 2031, and also known as the long-term plan. The process began back in late August last year. We held numerous workshops which covered our key topics for consultation and all council activities. Local board chairs and CCOs were involved in the process from the beginning and were invited to the workshops when relevant. You agreed consultation items in December and adopted the consultation document and supporting information on the 18th of February. Public consultation ran between the 22nd of February and the 22nd of March, and we received just shy of 20,000 pieces of feedback. Additional to this was a Colmar-Brunton survey, and all feedback was presented to you on the 21st of April. Following consultation, we ran another set of political workshops which focused on the key issues we consulted on and provided you with any updated or new information for consideration. On the 25th of May, you made all 10-year budget decisions, which have all been reflected in the final document seeking adoption today. A total of 156 political workshop and meeting hours have been spent on this recovery budget, plus today's meeting. The Mayor received an email from the Chair of Audit and Risk Committee this morning confirming there are no outstanding audit-related issues. Last week we held a workshop with you and took you through each of the volumes with draft versions. A table of changes was created and has been loaded to Nexus this morning. This will be added to today's minutes and documents everything that has been updated since the 18th of June. Most changes are editorial. There is some summary transport information that's been updated following the finalisation of the RLTP. We have Brian Sherritt, Executive General Manager Safety, and Shane Ellison, CEO from Auckland Transport, here to discuss the updated road safety measure listed as ID 23 on the document change log. Ngā mihi.
Ross, is there anything you want to add before I invite Shane and Ryan to the table?
No, nothing further.
Okay, if I could have Ryan Sheriff and Shane Ellison here. This is to discuss the one substantive change in terms of targets. And Shane, would you like to introduce the item, or are you deferring to Ryan on this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tēnā koutou katoa. Excuse me, my apologies. The change that we were seeking to make to the targets was in respect of DSI for this year. And to help you, to give you some background to that, we've put a graph up on screen. Sorry, it's not particularly polished. It was put together yesterday, but the graph on screen shows, I'll just talk you through that. So the graph on screen in the blue line shows the LTP targets for DSI on local roads from 2018 through to 2027, the last LTP period. That corresponded with the investment to be made in road safety. The orange line that you see there is what is actually transpired in terms of DSI on local roads. So 2018, 19 and 20 we have done, the trajectory has been significantly better than the profile in the last LTP. There's a number of factors to that, but in 2020, you'll all be aware of the impact of COVID-19. And over the period of that year, around 22% of the year, we operated at alert level 2, alert level 3, or alert level 4. So it was around 70 days where movement on the network, whether it be, principally be in terms of motor vehicles, but also reduced movement on public transport, and which also has corresponding walking and cycling trips associated with it, and also cycling numbers through the cycle counters around the region were down significantly, and there is a reasonably strong correlation between VKT and DSI. What we are, as unpalatable as this is going to sound, there is one other factor that I'd like to call out in terms of the targets for 2018 and the blue line. The blue line also was contingent on an investment profile that was to see $103 million spent on road safety infrastructure in 2020, 2021. You'll recall through the emergency budget that was originally going to be cut to 40 million, but thanks to your support, we got it reinstated to 60 million, but still a number that was significantly less than what that was required to support the blue profile. By having not made, so for two reasons, principally we are halfway through the year in terms of the DSI indicator. It starts on the 1st of January and goes through to the 30th or 31st of December. We are suggesting that the targets are reset and start at 525 for the 21-22 LTP or SOI year, but noting that in terms of the DSI measurement is actually measured from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. So far, it's not just hypothetical. We came to you in March to the Planning Committee. Actually, we came to the Planning Committee rather than governing body. And we gave you an update on the road safety program. And what we communicated to you at that time is, although that orange line has been going really, really well, we were deeply concerned about the upswing, particularly on deaths on the network in Auckland since after Alert Level 3 in September 2020. To give you a sense of the reality of this situation, we've pulled some data for the 1st of January this year to the 25th of June, so just a few days ago. And we can tell you that as compared with the same period 2020, the number of deaths on the network, so not serious injuries because that data lags, has gone from 15 in 2020 to 35 in 2021. So it's quite a real phenomenon. I'm not saying it's acceptable or palatable or any of those things, but I guess we would prefer to come and have the conversation now rather than you see the results later in the year, which are playing out as we suggested they might in March at Planning Committee. Brian, is there anything else you wanted to add at this point?
No, not particularly. I think that the challenge, I guess, is the way it's expressed in the table that you might have seen, which is an increase of not less than 70 between 2020 and 2021. That just lines us up with that dashed blue line, basically. And I think that the other thing we wanted to do with the dashed blue line was present a more realistic target for DSI moving forward, as opposed to the dark solid blue line, which is was being too easily achieved, I think.
Right. What I want to do is first of all outline how this particular item is going to be dealt with. First up will be questions to either our finance team or to Auckland Transport, so I'll ask all of you to stay at the table. Following that, I'll be inviting the Auditor General's team to the table to present their final report on their audit of our long-term plan, and then following that we'll move to debate and then to vote on the item. So the first section will be questions, and I just want to lead off with a question to Auckland Transport. I don't think anybody around this table likes the idea that there will be an increase, albeit from the low level that was established because of COVID-19. And I suppose there's a silver lining to every dark cloud that COVID-19 led to less deaths through flu and less deaths on the road. But now we're back to normal accelerated by probably more cars on the road than we've ever had because our public transport is down. But the level that you are projecting for 525 is still lower than what you were originally projecting. Are you confident that the latest figures you've got are reliable and that trajectory will continue to be below the original trajectory for this for deaths and serious injuries that you were earlier projecting? And can you maybe just give some explanation of that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, yes, the number, we're not suggesting the number goes back to the blue line. In March, we surfaced some concerns we had with elements of the total safe system approach to road safety, which was our concerns were around both enforcement and in respect of the policy environment. I'm pleased to say that thanks to your letter, Mr. Mayor, and the work that we've done ourselves, we've had very, very positive engagement with agencies in Wellington. And more than just engagement, what we are now seeing, which gives me some level of confidence around hitting that target, is action being taken in respect to operations being planned, which will lead to more mobile deterrence in terms of speeding and in terms of more drink driving checks being done on our road.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I mean, the concern that we had was I used to go through drink drive checks regularly on the way home and haven't been through one for 2 years. So you've had a clear indication from in response to the letter that I sent to the Minister of Police that the police are ramping up their activities on those two fronts that lead to predominant causes of death, both speeding and drink driving.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. We've got strong senior executive or senior officer support from Wellington in respect of those activities.
Well, that's very good news. So, any other questions? I've got Councillor Paul Young.
At any stage over the long-term plan budget process, the Auckland Transport mentioned to our finance team the possibility of any delay to the Eastern Busway Stage 2 to 4 due to the Auckland Council Group capital constraints.
Councillor Young, I wasn't party to conversations with the finance team at Auckland Council, but in the draft regional land transport plan, we called out the risks of a mismatch between the expenditure profile on a year-by-year cash flow basis versus what was potentially available. We noted that we would work with Council's finance team over the remaining period before the long-term plan and RLTP was adopted to see if we could find a resolution to that. So upon adoption of the mayoral proposal, we worked through that. What I would say to you, Councillor Young, and as Hamish Bunn said last week, what we apologise because, and the learning opportunity for us in terms of that is we probably should have flagged the risk a little more strongly than what we had through the LTP and RLTP development process.
And if I can just add to that, Councillor Young, I had the chance to discuss this with the Chair of the Board, Adrian Young-Cooper, yesterday, following the discussion that you and I had. And she is asking for more detailed advice to look at the capital program and timing for the Eastern Busway to see if the busway the timing of the last three stages of the busway can be brought forward. So that's still a live issue as far as I'm concerned to see. I think we were all disappointed that a key project in getting mode change and a key project for the east of Auckland was being addressed. Right, next question, Councillor Pipacoon.
Tēnā koe te kora matua, tēnei te mihi nui ki a koutou, tēnā kura Brian and Shane. Thank you. I just first of all, before I just get into some questions, I just want to clarify on the amendments. It says attachment A, but it doesn't say attachment A of what. So I just want to clarify where we're looking.
Through the chair, it should be in one document.
Yeah, that's the amendment, but amendment to what? Where is it in our documents? What attachment A of what?
So there's been a schedule of changes circulated here, which what this does is outlines the changes to the draft LTP document that was circulated, I think last week or so.
So there's 3 volumes.
Yeah, it's volume 2. It's the group of activity statement. Kylie, is it which section? Section 2.1, roads and footpaths, and section, yes, it's within 2.1, isn't it? Yeah, so it's section 2.1 of volume 2.
Thank you. It's just quite a lot of documentation to get through to find that quickly. So just in terms of my my questions, and it is very devastating to hear about that massive increase in deaths. In terms of, this is sort of a follow-on to the Mayor's question, and I mean, that's really good to hear that you've had senior police saying that they will be looking at speed enforcement. We've had kind of a contradictory response in Waitemata, where the police have said that their resources are stretched because of the various protest activity that's underway, which seems a little bit, you know, that kind of resourcing is very different to having an ongoing program of speed enforcement. So are we getting kind of the right signals in terms of, because we haven't seen any enforcement of the city centre speeds that were put in place over a year ago now. So I'm just really looking to see when that's going to happen.
Thank you, Councillor Coombe. So as late as yesterday, I had a meeting with senior police from Auckland. They are setting up a brand new tasking and coordination plan, which will start in the new financial year. It's based around a general deterrence model and a specific deterrence model. So they look at the high-risk areas, but also the general response across the network. So we can work with them through their tasking and coordination plan to actually assist them to direct where their policing resources will be allocated, both from a point of view of specific deterrence, but also from a general deterrence model across the whole network. So what we're looking for is an increased visibility and presence of police on the network, but also, as Shane was mentioning, to an increased use of things like covert mobile speed cameras, which we know are very effective in reducing death and serious injury. So the conversation yesterday, very, very positive, and looking to work with police to achieve those outcomes.
That's really good to hear, and appreciate an update when you get it in terms of what the program is and what we're likely to see, because I think we need to communicate that to our communities. Just a very quick second question, if I may, Mr. Chair. I haven't been able to find I want to find the attachment, but in terms of talking about targets for DSI, is that the wrong language, and is there a better way in which we can express? I mean, we don't want to have a target that we're going to kill and seriously injure a certain number of people on our networks. I mean, so yes to a target of 0, but in the interim, should we be expressing that quite differently?
If it's not expressed this way, I think it should be no more than. So we want to try and bring that down as low as we possibly can, as soon as we possibly can. It's always been the target, but I guess we're not actually aiming to kill and seriously injure 525 people next financial year. So we're actually looking to be less that and lower than that, but no more than that. So there might be just a bit of a terminology around how the wording is expressed, but it's no more than that.
So that is how it is in the documentation.
I'm not certain that's how it should be, yes.
Is that something we can ensure happens?
Yep, so the way it's expressed is determined by regulations. We don't have a choice. It has to be expressed as a year-on-year change. So normally it would be what's the number of reductions? So how much does it reduce year on year? This year is an exception because it's gone up. It's an increase of no more than a certain number. But it must be expressed as a year-on-year change. That's regulation. It is something that, in the fullness of time, we can work with the Department of Internal Affairs and see is it the best way across the sector to measure these things. But at the moment, we've got to follow the regulations.
Thank you.
I think the target is reducing, not the number of deaths. I think we all take that point. Councillor Shane Henderson.
Thanks, Mayor. 2 questions. If there's a strong correlation between vehicle kilometres travelled and deaths and serious injuries, would you accept that the most important thing that Council and AT can do is to try and give people the option to reduce their vehicle kilometres travelled?
For a number of objectives of Council and AT, reducing VKT will lead to positive outcomes, whether that be carbon emissions or DSI. Okay. And whether that's achieved through mode shift or other means, then it is likely to end up with better safety outcomes.
Cool. Thank you. Just one supplementary. Is a delay in projects like the North Western Interim Busway consistent with this aim?
I'm not so sure there is a delay in the North West Interim improvements, and I've got your email and we will respond. You will be aware that originally the North West, and you'll get this response in the fullness of time, that originally we had the project was set for $50 million. It's intended to have shovels in the ground for the scope of work around that first $50 million by the end of the 3rd quarter of this calendar year. Okay, September the 30th. So the 30th, the second $50 million had to be business cased and will require consenting. And that is what you see in terms of the RLTP, in terms of the what is likely to be, business case not approved, but a more customer-friendly facility at Westgate than was originally planned, and potentially facilities at Brigham Creek.
Thank you. Probably a good point for Councillor Linda Cooper to follow up with her question.
Yeah, it was. So, of course. And I know that you sent us a letter a year ago, July the 6th, outlining the massive increases in access to public transport and within a 45-minute journey to the city. And we did say it was going to be last year and it was going to be the year before. So I understand you're saying now it's going to be this year. I guess for me the question then is this still live? The Eastern Busway has sort of dominated the front pages. It's important, but I'd say this is equally important. And I just want to know how much the you know, the what is it, the pedal to the metal to the pedal, in terms of this project, because it has been delayed over and over. And I guess I want some comfort that this is going to actually be delivered when we say, when it is said. I haven't said, I don't get a say, to be quite honest. It's decided by somebody else.
Through you, Chair. So the contracts have been entered into by, it's being delivered, the actual first part, which is the bus priority measures on State Highway 16, being delivered by Waka Kotahi. They have entered into contracts to start that work. The only thing I would say is that with anything that is in the RLTP that has not already had a business case approved, that still needs to go through the National Land Transport Plan program and have a business case and funding application approved by Waka Kotahi.
Thank you. Supplementary, would you please ask Waka Kotahi to enforce their bus lanes, because people are so frustrated with the journeys they're going on the on-ramp on the bus lanes. They're not T2, and so for me that's setting up an expectation that people can keep driving on them, and when the buses come, it's going to be a problem.
And I think the answer to that will probably be yes, that you'll look at enforcing that.
We are having those conversations with Waka Kotahi, and those conversations include the potential for AT to do that on their behalf and in terms of going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. My question goes to meeting our climate change obligations. We know that the budget that we have, which is a 10-year budget, doesn't meet certainly New Zealand's climate change obligations, of which Auckland is a significant part. And we know also that that's due not just to our budgeting, but obviously a variety of measures that the government needs to put in place. As a consequence, are you doing scenario-based budgeting that's anticipating things that we might have, so that we're in a state of preparedness? Because I'm mindful that as much and all as we have this 10-year budget, it's not going to last the distance of the 10 years. It probably even won't last the distance of 1 year. And the other question that I've got that also just goes to scenario planning is around the operational costs associated with CRL that are also somewhat of an unknown, because we haven't got the deal struck around that yet. So just a couple of questions around those issues as they go to the 10-year budget process.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, there's been even since, there was conversation about how many hours you'd spent on this LTP process. And it's been a lot of time in development, and the same with the RLTP, and a lot has changed in that period already. Including when we started this, there was not the cleaner emission standards for vehicles that's due to come in 2025. We didn't know about the clean car discount that was announced about 2 weeks ago. So those things are all evolving, and some of them the impacts of those have not been taken into account at this point in time, because of the shortness of time, and in terms of the impact upon emissions budgets and emissions targets of council and what we'd like to achieve. And some of them are material. We see this as a key part of the transport emissions pathway work that we will be doing with you over the next 6 to 9 months, in terms of looking at scenarios and pathways forward to tackle what is an incredible challenge.
A supplementary question, Mr. Chair. Given that some of these things I'd suggest are of a high order of magnitude, they will affect our budget going forward. Do you think we should have some sort of rider against this long-term plan, so that as much and all as we may not be making provisions for things that we could and should, that we should be indicating to the public at large that we are going to need to make changes because this plan doesn't meet obligations?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can't comment. I'm not an auditor, and I can't comment on on the requirements in terms of the materiality and things like that. What I can say is, look, a number of the material things are policy changes, which we're seeing. We know, for example, the MOT have indicated to us that the clean car discount will result in 9.5 million tonnes of carbon being saved over the next 30 years across New Zealand, and we don't have at this point in time an Auckland number for that for the period of this RLTP. And we know that in 3 years' time that we'll be back doing another RLTP, if not sooner, to tackle what we need to tackle with urgency.
Thank you. I think the Transport Emissions Reduction Plan is probably the pathway that we'll be following there, but also should the decision be taken to bring in congestion charges, if that does reduce transport congestion by 10% in peak hour, then that should also have a significant effect. But we are going to have to ramp all of those things up. Councillor Sharon Stewart.
Thank you. Sorry, I haven't got COVID. I've just got a bit of a haven't been very well. Just on the Eastern Busway, would you not agree that if the program, until the program is actually finished, the project's not actually going to work? Because at the moment we've got all the work that's happened right now. We've got cars still struggling to get. You know, we're really having a struggle to get through.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We anticipate that benefits will start accruing from October this year. When stage 1 of the Eastern Busway is complete, it will provide enhanced services, fast and frequent services between Pakuranga and Panmure. Sure, that will not, and I don't try to pretend that it won't. Should the program that is set out in the RLTP occur, that the benefits couldn't come sooner or wouldn't accrue sooner. But it's not to say that all the benefits, that no benefits accrue until 2027. That's not the case. The benefits will start accruing from October this year.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Hills.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think you're getting grilled on questions probably you weren't preparing for, Shane, but I guess I'll add to the choir. I guess my gutted nature of the conversations last week just being, in all honesty, blindsided on the Eastern Busway. I guess when do you think, and it might be the Alliance, not you personally, could come to us and explain? Sorry.
Please continue, Councillor.
It's the choir that you're
lucky the lyrics didn't start then.
Good. That's clever.
Sorry. Just on the Eastern Busway, because I think, in my opinion, there is a possibility we just didn't have the opportunity to try and reconfigure budget sometime soon to try and move that forward. The other discussion I just want clarification on is potentially there are some issues in the later parts because of land purchase and things that we can't actually put in there yet. And I guess to Councillor Stewart's question, just I don't feel like because we were blindsided, in my opinion, we didn't get actually the full story. So people think the whole thing is delayed. So I'm obviously disappointed about any delay to any part of it. But what hasn't been told to people is that parts of it are still on track and you'll be able to open them. So when would we be able to get some kind of presentation on the possibilities of ensuring it's all finished on time, but also acknowledging, because I've asked for my own presentation a few months ago and Deputy Mayor allowed that to happen, which was great, but I don't think people understand and I'm a bit in the dark. So on that specific project, could you give us any indication of how you're working? And just the last little question is just on safety, and it might be a question for Brian too, the cycling, how we can ramp up that cycling renewals budget to be a safety as well. It's not all about emissions. If you make it safer for kids and anyone to cycle around their neighbourhood, the DSI numbers are going to come way down too. So thank you.
So once again, apologise for not just to yourself, but to all the councillors about being blindsided. I was the timing surprised us as well in terms of how that played out. But there are a number of funding inputs which are also in play at the moment, and until the NLTF is finalised around the 30th of September, we won't actually know fully what is funded and what is not. It's fair to say that the RLTP is probably indicative. And when you're playing with numbers, the size of the numbers of not just Eastern Busway, but City Rail Link and the supporting infrastructure of City Rail Link, such as additional trains, such as level crossings, and it means that you need the passing of time to get a little bit closer to those dates, and you need quite a bit more work done until you know how the cash flows are actually going to play out. But what there is, and what was asked for by our board yesterday, was for detailed work to be done. There are potentially opportunities, and I say potentially, opportunities to bring forward things like property purchase as part of over-programming into earlier years of the LTP period. What might also play out is we can shift expenditure by a matter of 6 months to 1 year or another year, which may free up capital in that 24, 25, 25, 26 period in terms of what plays out. There's no guarantees around that, but that is quite a wee way down the track in terms of that. The other thing, to go back to right at the start of your question, and for all councillors' benefit, AT signed what is called an IPAA, which is an interim project alliance agreement with a consortium earlier this year. The first stage of the alliance is actually to work up a detailed plan, detailed program, and a detailed design with detailed costings that will be finished late this year or early 2022. At that point, we'll have more certainty about what that looks like and be able to bring that together with what cash flows look like a bit later. But outside the Eastern Busway, programs and projects will move over time depending on things like consenting, business casing, how we engage with the community and what the outcomes of all that are. The RLTP is best described from my perspective. It is a guide. The world just doesn't work in black and white over a 10-year period like that, as you've seen the last 12 or 18 months.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the answer to those. Sorry, the last question, Councillor Christabi.
Sorry, and apologise, Mayor, I thought there might have been some others. So just on the Eastern Busway, and I thank Shane for his replies to me yesterday at the Auckland Transport Board meeting. So members, Mayor, and for Councillors Young and Stewart, I did strongly represent, I think it was our view at the board yesterday, and the board is similarly concerned. It is equally as concerned as we all are, as is the management. Shane, I think you've been quite diplomatic in your explanation as to what did and didn't happen, but maybe it's easier for me to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, but Auckland Transport receives funding from the Crown via Waka Kotahi primarily, and from us, and we've allocated a budget, and then they need to allocate that to projects and programs, and they get an allocation from Waka Kotahi as well. There was indication of an agreement at 75% subsidy. Well, no, not precisely, but there was, Shane, my understanding from your explanation yesterday, there was reasonably good expectation that we would be receiving 75%, and it was quite late in the piece. In fact, it was not even a letter, it was a Friday afternoon phone
Councillor,
call.
sorry to interrupt. I need you asked a question. This is a question session at the moment, not commentary.
Yeah, well, look, I think we need to then ask Shane to just... I was attempting to not put Shane in this predicament because it is a political situation we find ourselves in. So Shane, do you want, if I have to ask a question, Shane, take us through how you got to know. Was it a letter, as is normal? Was it a phone call? What was the timing leading into the writing of your paper? And also, can you tell us the implications of the regional fuel tax implications as well? Because I understand there are implications because there's regional fuel tax money on the busway as well, isn't there? So I'll pose it as a question.
Okay, we have the question. Shane, if you'd like to address that. This is, of course, the whole subject is under the RLTP rather than the long-term plan, but because the opportunity seemed appropriate, I've allowed that discussion to go on.
You cannot consider the RLTP unless you understand that we set the budget, Mr Mayor, and
you've asked your question,
that's a major mistake.
and I'm asking Shane now, please, to answer it.
Through you, Chair. So to be, so there is clarity over this, the ATAP agreement and prescribed some work to occur and some questions to be asked to cover some funding shortfall that is in it. And one of the questions that was called out in there was for Waka Kotahi to consider a higher financial assistance rate for rapid transit projects, so greater than 50%. Typically, we seek to get 50% across the whole program of what we do, 50% from yourselves, 50% from Waka Kotahi. That varies, and on some activities we do, innovating streets, it's a 90% financial assistance rate. On other things like road safety, sometimes it's 70%, 75% far. Rapid transit's been an interesting one, and one we are trying to advocate strongly for outside of light rail, which we'll put to one side, and that is because of the national significance implications of rapid transit. We think, and other reasons as well, we think they merit a higher financial assistance rate than 50%. As I said, the National Land Transport Fund and National Land Transport Plan is in development. It doesn't get finalised to the 30th of September. We know that from the communication that Waka Kotahi has publicly made available, that the National Land Transport Fund is under significant pressure. And because of that, they have verbally advised us on about less than 2 weeks ago that a higher financial assistance rate was not going to be available for the Eastern Busway. And that clearly impacts the cash available to progress with the Eastern Busway as we originally thought.
So, Mayor, this is an LTP discussion. I would suggest, to clarify this matter, that and I have seen the memo from Shane as of Monday, I think it was Saturday actually, but I think it would be good to get a memo to all the councillors, and it probably needs to expand on the first memo to cover all the ground, including the RFT implications. Okay, and the way out following yesterday's meeting and concern raised by the board.
Yeah. Can I suggest that it may have been before you got here, Councillor, I had spoken to the chair of the board. I had asked for a formal letter to be sent to us, both giving an explanation of the reason for the 2-year deferral and the late notice of it, but also to further examine the possibility of bringing that project forward before the 2028 new completion date. So that will hopefully cover your point, Councillor.
Yeah,
I'd like to.
That's pretty much what the board resolved yesterday after we discussed.
Yep. So we'll have that formally in writing, and when I get that in writing, I'll distribute it. Okay. Can I thank officers at the end of the table for a discussion that probably went a little bit outside of the parameters of what you were expecting. At this stage, I'd like to invite Greg Scollin, the Deputy Auditor General, and his team, Andrea Reeves and Athol Graham, to come to the table to present to us on their audit report of our long-term plan. So welcome to all three of you, and welcome to COVID-free Auckland, I should say, to our Wellingtonians. Sorry, it's probably inappropriate. And look forward to hearing your report. Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kia ora, tātou. Yes, it's. I think we brought the weather up as well. So, just in terms of roles, so Andrea, as you know, looks after our local government audits across the country. So she has that sort of national lens, and Athol has operational responsibility for the audit of Auckland Council Group. So the LTP is a really important accountability document for the council. And it creates the anchor point really for the next 3 years. You can amend it before then, but all other things being equal, you'll be back in this cycle in 3 years' time, updating the long-term plan. It's also a really helpful guide, we think, for guiding council decision-making in the meantime. Obviously, there's a number of intentions set out in your long-term plan or underpinned in terms of the underlying information. It's interesting to note at this point, I think, that your LTP for Auckland Council Group is the only group LTP across the country. So all the other long-term plans of councils is for the council only. So that's significant, I think, given the importance of water care and Auckland Transport to your group. The council's undertaken a comprehensive process to get to this point, as has been alluded to again this morning. Including, of course, the consultation document, which we also audited earlier in the year. I think it's fair to say this long-term plan cycle's been prepared not only by you here, but around the country in a heightened level of uncertainty, clearly with COVID and other matters. So planning is quite challenging normally, and there's always uncertainty about the future and forecasts about the future. But we think that's been heightened in this long-term plan process. A key principle, though, for you as you anoint this long-term plan is to be happy that it reflects your best knowledge of the future, recognising that things change. But as of today, when you adopt it, is it your best knowledge, and is it underpinned by reasonable and supportable assumptions? You've got some really important processes to help assure you that's the case, like the legal sign-off, the project control group sign-off, and of course the Audit and Risk Committee, and no doubt other systems and processes within the council. So you've got various things to reassure you as a governing body that that's the case. Our role, of course, is to step back from that and to express an independent view, whether we think it's based on your best knowledge and reasonable and supportable assumptions. And we have been in discussions with management and the Audit and Risk Committee about one particular assumption over recent weeks, and that's around the ATAP funding. But we have now completed our audit and there are no outstanding issues, so that issue's been resolved. Yes, thankfully. It was a live issue last week at Audit and Risk, but it's now resolved. So I've signed an unmodified audit opinion on the long-term plan, which means essentially that it's fit for purpose in terms of that accountability and decision-making purpose that it has. I've also chosen, though, to emphasise a number of uncertainties. So, as I said, there's increased uncertainty generally, but we've overlaid the Auckland Council situation across that. So the areas that I've wanted to draw attention to for the readers is the water reforms. Now, clearly that affects councils all over the country. We've taken a national approach to that. All councils have assumed the status quo will continue. In other words, that you'll continue to deliver water services, but clearly that is uncertain. Decisions are yet to be made which could affect the assumptions that have been made in the long-term plan. Forecast funding, including ATAP funding, is another area that we've emphasised, and the City Rail Link project. So the overall project costs and where the assets might ultimately lie between the Crown and the Council, because that's going to affect operating costs and forward projections. And I'd just like to finish by acknowledging both teams, the Council team and my team. I think this process started nearly a year ago. It's quite a draining process for everyone, but we're here, and this is a key moment, I think, for the council. So thank you to the council team led by Ross. But no doubt there's lots of people, so it's dangerous to name people, but we've certainly had a lot to do with Ross. But Neville, anything to add?
Yeah, nothing substantial to add. I think, it's been a major project for us as the auditors, for management as the preparers, and council as decision makers. There's been multiple stakeholders inputting into the process up to this point across the group and within council, so we've engaged with all of those stakeholders as necessary. But yeah, the main thing I wanted to say is I've worked very closely with Ross and his team, as well as the legal team and the risk and assurance team. So just a thanks to them for working collaboratively with us and positively to get to this point today. So that's all I'd add.
Thank you very much. Andrew, is there anything you'd like to add there? We heard one audible comment in response. I think everybody in this room will be very happy to hear that we don't have outstanding issues, that we have an unmodified audit opinion, which is in our term a clean audit, a fit-for-purpose audit, as you said, Greg. And we also acknowledge the uncertainties that you've pointed out quite appropriately, and it has been a big and uncertain year for us. I don't think there has been a year like the last year that anyone around the table or anybody in your office probably remembers. And we're grateful that we came through both with a good health result, but also that we have addressed the challenges and addressed them appropriately, and that you've found that what we've done is, as you said, fit for purpose. So really appreciate that, and appreciate the comments that you've made about our finance team, our legal team, and our risk and audit team. It's great that we live in a country where we have this independent audit occur, but we have a professional relationship between our teams and your team, and I want to thank you very much for that. Now, it is open for questions. Normally, there aren't a lot of questions because your opinion speaks for itself. We've exchanged letters of representation, but I will see if there's anybody that wants to ask a question of our audit team. Councillor Walker.
Just a rather general question, but given that it would appear that councils, particularly our councils, are facing multiple uncertainties, and generally our budgetary process is pretty standard. We come up with one option and that's it. But given that there are a number of scenarios that are likely, do you think it's desirable for councils to have more scenario-based planning when it comes to budgeting, so that in a circumstance where we might need to revisit our long-term budget in, say, a year's time or 2 years' time, based around some things that have got an element of predictability, is that a management consideration that the audit facility thinks is desirable?
Through you, Chair. I think certainly as you develop your consultation document, that's entirely appropriate, I think, to look at scenarios. But the long-term plan does require the council to, in effect, settle on I guess, what your best view of the future is for the council, underpinned by the forecast. So that doesn't mean you can't change it. And in fact, there are processes for you to amend the long-term plan ahead of the 3-year cycle. Yeah, so I think scenarios also are particularly useful internally. So, even if you don't consult the community, it's useful to look at different options, you know, how it affects debt or rates or whatever, that's all entirely valid for the council to do. But in the end, the long-term plan does need to contain sort of the best view based on best knowledge.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Otherwise, then just in thanking you again, I'd also like to acknowledge the role of our Audit and Risk Committee, and particularly our private sector people that are on that, chaired by Sue Sheldon. I think that gives us another level of assurance that what we're doing from an outside point of view is the appropriate thing to do or way to do it. So acknowledgement of Sue Sheldon and her team. So thank you, Greg and Andrea in particular, for making the trip up, and Ethel for accompanying the team here and being the Auckland-based representative of the Office of the Auditor General. We really do appreciate your professionalism, your competence, and in this particular case, we appreciate your reassurance that things have been done in the right manner and it is a fit-for-purpose document. So many thanks for your ongoing work. And have a safe trip back to Wellington through the cold and the blizzard and the wind. Right, we now come to the last section of item number 10, which is comment. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the process, we have had 156 hours of discussion. So we won't necessarily be going over all of that ground again at length, but it is important that people who feel that they want to make a comment do have the opportunity to do so. But I'll ask you, if you can, to keep it as concise as possible. And we'll begin with Councillor Desley Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. You're quite right. Today's not the time for big speeches and thank yous because they've been done and they have been reported on. It is, however, the final step in what has so far been, as we've heard, a 156-hour process of debate and discussion to get us to this, our 10-year recovery budget. Now, I'm not about to give a big speech and add to that time, and we all know it's not business as usual, but as Chair of Finance, what I will say is that we are investing more than ever in the infrastructure our region so desperately needs. That's both new investment and the renewal of our existing assets and infrastructure, as well as bringing forward some significant work programs to improve water quality. So how do we fund it all? First, by being more efficient as an organisation. The budget for this will be challenging for Jim, but he knows and we know that is expected, needed and achievable. Secondly, we will temporarily borrow more than we traditionally do, knowing we have discussed this with our rating agencies who have indicated they are comfortable with this. We know what the rate settings are to support our budget. We certainly don't have the highest average general rates rise in New Zealand, quite the opposite. We already know that Tauranga, Hamilton, Dunedin and Wellington are all above us. But I also want to make it clear that we don't expect Auckland ratepayers to pay for everything. Only 37% of our income in year one will come from rates, and that's down on the 39% this year, and well lower than other cities. We also now know, having listened to the Office of the Auditor General, that our strategy supports prudent financial management. I'd like to thank them as well for sitting in on all those 150 plus hours of workshops and for their significant deliberations and audit opinion. It gives both us around the table and Aucklanders confidence in the budget that we will pass today. So is it perfect? No, nothing is. We don't know what the future will hold, but in my personal opinion, backed by our Treasury and Finance team and the Office of the Auditor General, this budget is fiscally prudent enough to ensure if we stay safe, we can recover well, and if we don't, we can weather that storm too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. You've set the bar for keeping it reasonably brief. Councillor Chris Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also recognise that this is not the time for trying to relitigate issues and we're at the end of the process. But I do wish to speak at the adoption of this budget, and in doing so, I respectfully acknowledge the officers for their work and also the chair of the Finance Committee. But ultimately, the officers' response has been to the brief that we as elected members gave them. The need for investment in Auckland, we all know, is absolutely overwhelming. And I've struggled because I can see the enormous investment that will be required looking further ahead. And it's been difficult to hold a minority view within the council on the way that we might have approached this. We do need to take better care of our assets and we have to prioritise these things. But my difficulty with this proposal is that it's all about, in terms of the marketing recovery, and somehow miraculously we've conveyed this impression that it's all going to be fixed with a one-off 5% increase. I don't believe it. And I know that it's just a question of time. We'll be coming back for more. And I think the Chair of Finance recognises and acknowledges this, but it will be increasing pressure, not less pressure. And that's why I found it really hard to sign up to a 5%, because I know it's going to be necessary to come back for more, and I would have liked to have approached it differently. The real rate of hope for me is in our new CEO and in his message from the CEO within the documentation, which is of a very high standard. He says, our communities, partners and businesses are also under unprecedented pressure. There's an expectation on council to make sure we are doing the things that are necessary for our communities, doing them well and not encumbering ourselves with services for which there are better providers and solutions in the market. Understanding current and future service demands is also timely, given the significant government reform. So without taking a huge amount of everybody's time here, I think that we have to open our eyes to different ways that we might do things. And because of that, I will foreshadow my opposition to the 5% rate increase, because I think for my community, it would be dishonest of me to present it as somehow the fix-it, because I know it won't be the fix-it. We can tick the boxes, and it's been great to get reassurance from audit and so forth and on the fundamental assumptions that we're dealing with, and great to see issues resolved. But there are huge challenges ahead of us, and this will not be the end of the story. So for that reason, while I respect very much the officers who've worked so diligently to prepare this material, I think we have to put a question over ourselves as to what our brief might be for going forward, because we're going to need more, not less. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Linda Cooper.
Thank you. And I do apologise, but I did not get an opportunity to speak at the last because I was being kind and not adding my name to the list, and then I missed the opportunity because I had to leave. So I do want to take this opportunity because I did write this, though I will have to amend some of it because of our recent news about the delay in the RTN. So first, I do want to acknowledge the way that this budget's been developed. Early in this amalgamated council, we had the mayoral proposal put before us and not much change happened, often including many unpleasant surprises. What's happened this time is that the mayor's waited and listened while the full council, 170 elected members, have had the opportunity, under the leadership of Councillor Desley Simpson, to listen, question and propose in order to shape the final budget. And that's really been a much more collegial and productive exercise, and something most of us can support. Central party politics is pretty much irrelevant in local government. And I want to thank the majority of submitters for supporting the natural environmental targeted rate increase, because it's clear that our environment's very important to Aucklanders. And the Waitakere Ranges are a regional taonga, but for Westies, both urban, rural and coastal, they're local and loved and protected with a passion. And this increase means that our many voluntary community environmental groups can continue that protection, fighting pests and weeds with support from this budget. But I also want to acknowledge that what we didn't start out to do, we did in the end grasp the nettle of making sure that we budget enough to maintain the buildings and the assets that we own, including roads and footpaths. And it's been left too long and risked terminal breakdown of facilities. Just like any homeowner, maintenance of your precious asset protects your investment and keeps the rain from coming in the roof. Thank you for trusting your councillors, Mr Mayor, and local boards on this point and being brave enough to make the one-off 5% increase to address this increasingly alarming gap in the work needing to be done and the lack of funds to do so. And also for not caving to borrowing to the hilt so that we do have a buffer to meet any shocks in these uncertain times. But I also want to thank you for leaving the business rates on their reducing trajectory pathway. And that'll be appreciated, and it's important because 90% of our businesses are small and local. For me, creating public transport infrastructure is one of the most effective ways we can reduce CO2 emissions, and making it easy for people to swap car, bus trips, trains, ferries as much as they can. Therefore, and this is the bit that I've changed, therefore I'm bitterly disappointed to see meaningful public transport efforts being made towards an RTN along State Highway 16, which will serve over 300,000 people in the northwest, delayed again for years. This delay means continued transport poverty of time, money, increasing congestion and emissions, and a huge missed opportunity to meet some of our Auckland Plan goals, but it's not to be. We're failing some of our most needy communities. Though I must say, long-awaited Lincoln Road improvements, which had also been deferred for years, will finally happen. And I guess when we get an RTN, that'll be ready and fit for purpose to serve that. I also need to say, the elephant in the room, is we were promised 100% funding of an RTN in the northwest, and as soon as light rail went, then we were back to sharing it, which seemed really a broken promise and bad faith from my point of view. Increases in household expenses are always tough, and none of us want to pay more, and indeed for some people there's no spare money. But I'm comforted that we do have a compassionate support for people in that situation. I've thought about this a lot, as many of my West Auckland constituents do struggle. However, voting against this budget would mean a vote for our facilities that people value, like libraries, regional facilities, our zoos, our galleries, local community centres, sports fields, playgrounds, that are often free to access for these communities, would go into decline. It'd been no PT improvements, poor quality water, lack of drinking water, forests ravaged by Kari dieback, weeds, pests, no major events, no economic development work. And I can't be responsible for that happening. I can't leave Auckland to stagnate. So I will support significant investment into our children's and grandchildren's future for a clean, prosperous, attractive city where it's easy to move around and where they want to live and raise their families. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Paul Young.
I would like to take this opportunity to make some comments about the recent changing in the Auckland Transport's budget and the delay to completion of the Stage 2 to Stage 4 of the Eastern Busway, Pakuranga to the Botany. The Eastern Busway project has been around in some form for decades. The first stage of the MT Eastern Busway project was completed 7 years ago with the updated Panmure Station in 2014 to provide for bus and train connections. Under the current project timeframes, by the time the final stage of the busway is complete in 2028, and will have been a 14 years gap between the Panmure Station and connecting it to the Botany with a busway. 14 years for a busway. We are quick to say the Eastern Busway is the second largest infrastructure project after the CRL, but are we showing how important it is? Then there are also the emissions concern of delaying this public transport connection to one of the most car-dependent parts of our cities. Question: Auckland Transport could not answer fully and did not even seem to have considered it. I know this story is shared with other parts of the region, and I also feel for my fellow councillor in the West who have a similar story, waiting for a rapid transit and a busway for the fast-growing Northwest. I'm raising this today because I'm frustrated at Auckland Transport's last minute changing to the RLTP. It was too late for us to have any chance to find solution in our own budget, which has already been agreed, and we are rubber stamping now. It's not the fault of the mayor or the finance chair. I know they are also keen to find a solution, and we are also surprised by the last-minute advice from Auckland Transport, but it needs to improve. However, I also understand this is not a decision that can be changed today, and voting against signing off our LTP will not change anything. I want solutions. I will be voting in supporting of signing off this package, which we agreed last month and has been worked on as Team Auckland, led by Madam Chair Simpson. The LTP has benefits for the East, such as securing a community centre and library in Flatbush, returning local transport funding, and providing route protection for airport to Botany. However, I would like to note my concern about the Eastern Busway delay. I have to take a responsibility, and I will be looking for support from the mayor and my fellow councillors to bring in the capital facing forward at the next possible opportunity. I refuse to accept the delay on this. Thank you, Mayor. 谢谢.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Councillor Pipaku.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did give my speech in support back on the 24th of May, and in particular, noting that acknowledging the consensus building approach to the LTP, and thank you, Madam Chair, for leading that with the Mayor. In particular, the support of the local boards. To have 20 out of 21 local boards to support the LTP is quite phenomenal, especially those local boards who represent the parts of Auckland that have the worst inequalities and underfunding. But they recognise, along with the majority of submitters that came from all sectors of Auckland, recognising that this is a budget that focuses on investment. And I think that's what we heard really strongly was the need for investment across climate action, our community facilities for housing, managing growth, and to meet all of the challenges for Auckland. And thank you, Councillor Young, too, for highlighting just one example of the local investment that we get from the LTP. So we heard all of that investment that's wanted across Auckland. What we didn't hear from anybody around this table is where nobody wants any cuts in their area, and no one has put that on the table. No one has come up with alternative funding. So I just don't think it's an honest approach to decision making to ask for all the investment but not want to pay for it. So I summed up all of that, I think, back in May. But I did just want to note, it really does concern me that we've had this change to a measure come to us at the very last moment. And I would like to find a way of recording my vote against this change to the DSI measure in the key performance measures, to change it from that we're looking to reduce DSI by 50 to then find out that Auckland Transport wants that to be worded to increase by no more than 70 is really distasteful and just, I think, very upsetting for to see that put into the measures. So I don't know, Mr. Mayor, if there's a way that I can record my opposition to that in terms of noting that I just don't think we should accept that change to the performance measures. It's totally within Auckland Transport's power to manage DSI down. I just don't accept the reasons why we've heard that this, it's really terrible to hear that deaths have doubled on this time last year, and that we should now just change the measure to reflect that by making it a softer measure. If that's what I'm understanding that Auckland Transport's brought to us today. There are a whole lot of factors that go into reducing deaths and serious injuries on our roads, and most of those factors are controlled by Auckland Transport working along with agencies such as the police and Waka Kotahi. And that can be supporting measures that do encourage more kids to walk and cycle to school, can be simple things like signage. If there was a recent fatality in Waitemata involving a rider, and that wouldn't have happened if there had just been some decent signage on the road, providing an alternative route, which was there, a safe route. So all of those factors, I just feel that we should not be accepting that change to the performance measure. So if that is possible, Mr. Mayor, I really would appreciate that, because that's just the only thing I really wanted to speak to today was about that change to the measure. Thank you. But I do confirm my support for adopting the recovery budget overall, and commend everybody to this the process that we've been through, and the budget overall. So thank you, Ngā mihi.
Thank you very much, Councillor. In answer to your question, there isn't a particular recommendation on that particular measurement on DSI, but I think you've noted your concern about it in your speech, so that will be on record in that sense. Councillor Kathy Casey.
Oh, great. I think everything's been said about this budget in one way or another over the last 160 plus hours. I want to focus on one aspect too, and that's our libraries, in particular the momentous decision that we do today to remove library fines. And I want a big shout out to the libraries, so I'm going to use my 3 or 4 minutes just on that. People love libraries in Auckland. Use them for any number of things, getting information, doing your homework, pleasure reading, learning about computers, looking for a job, you name it. What gets in the way of that, folks, is library fines. Put your hand up, everybody, there must be 100 people in this room if you've ever had a library fine. Oh, come on, you guys up the back. You don't lose libraries? You're not listening. Everybody, we are in the fortunate position that we can actually pay the fine. Everybody in this room's on a good salary. There are 35,000 library users in Auckland that can no longer use the library because they've got fines of more than $10. And today, we're sorting that. We're allowing Aucklanders back into our libraries from the 1st of September. There'll be some rules around that, but the fact is that cost will no longer be a barrier to people's access. And I think that is absolutely stunning. And I want to say a big shout out to Louise Lahat, who led this from the start, and there was some opposition. There was some opposition, Mr. Mayor, in the beginning about the loss of revenue. Catherine Leonard's team supported and gave the data to build an evidential case for unanimous support from this council, then and now, and from the public. This is something the public wants, and it's just fantastic. So we are now joining 9 other councils in New Zealand that are fine-free in their libraries, and 600 other councils across the world. We are, again, at the leading edge of what's happening in libraries. Thank you very much, Auckland Libraries, and thank you very much to each and every one of my colleagues.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the councillors being concise. Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore.
Yeah, I'm going to be very concise too, Mr. Mayor, recognising you and Councillor Simpson for your chairing of Audit and Risk, and for Shane, Deputy Chair. So your finance work, Desley, with you call it the council family, has been superb. Well done. This is the biggest LTP this council's done. It's 37 billion in transport, 31 billion in general funding, including some transport funding, right? It's giving a degree of certainty as much as we can over the next 10 years about delivering a capital program and the ongoing operational expenses that's incurred by that. At the same time, we've made over $120 million worth of savings. At the time, since 2010 till now, the city's grown by over 300,000, some would argue closer to 400,000 people. And yet our operational expenditure has not increased in that same level. It has increased by 1.5% on average per year. That's a really good news story. It's ongoing savings of over 300 million in cash, and in kind, it's over 1.2 billion. We're delivering record amounts of capital, but is it enough? No, it never will be. And because of our population growth, we can't build it fast enough to keep up with that. And that's the real challenge the city faces. The other big challenge is the cost of materials is rapidly rising. I was with a bunch of developers down south yesterday afternoon. the cost of a basic average house per square metre has risen from 3,200 to 4,100 per square metre, according to their figures, in 12 months. That's a really big number. And I suggest to you the cost of us supplying key infrastructure, whether it be pipes, roads, rail, or all things in between, will also rise exponentially because of the worldwide shortages and stresses that COVID has brought upon the supply chain. The delivery of the capital budget is critical. When I first got elected, we were lucky to do 80% delivery. We're now doing into the 90s, even with COVID. Without COVID, we've probably been into nearly 100% delivery of the capital program this year. But one ingredient is missing. We might have a 10-year budget, but the governments do not. And it doesn't matter what government there is in power. They have an allocation to Waka Kotahi and the Ministry of Transport and Kiwi Rail on a year-by-year budget allocation. And that creates procurement challenges and difficulties. It creates uncertainty. And as we've seen in recent times, it creates political incursions that have considerable and dramatic effect upon budgets. And we've seen the latest one was the Northwestern and the Eastern Rapid Transport Network being delayed. And there was Mill Road prior to that earlier, which is going to slow down delivery of aggregates and add to further cost and carbon. This situation has to change if we're going to get up and keep up with population growth. So, Mr Mayor, I'm going to applaud the budget and applaud you for doing the work, and all my fellow councillors and local board members, and particularly the staff. Ross and his team, but general staff, for all the work that's gone in with this work. It is considerable. And you're doing it because we all believe in a better Auckland. We might have been marked as the most livable city in COVID times. That doesn't make us the best. Our productivity's fallen from where we used to be right beside Ireland, and Ireland's currently running at 14th position in the OECD productivity rankings. We've dropped to 44th. It's near the bottom. And that is an indictment upon all of us, central and local government. We do have to lift the game, be braver and do more. So maybe plough ahead, Mr Mayor, and take the challenges we're going to face the rest of this year into next year and adapt with it, because we have to move and be fleet of foot and brave. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Cashmore. Councillor Shane Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, like many, I wasn't kind of planning on speaking. I'll be very brief, I promise. Just compelled to throw a few thoughts in. I want to acknowledge Councillor Young for your views in particular today. And I'll just remind colleagues, if he's looking for support on the Eastern Busway, our transport system is a network. It's important to every single resident in Auckland, and we should all support that call for help wholeheartedly and get that Eastern Busway going. I want to acknowledge the increased spend on footpaths in the RLTP. That hasn't come out too much. It's not one of those headline sexy things, but it's incredibly important. It's extremely important work for places like rural areas in Waitakere and others to help parents reduce their short trips to school if they can. That'll keep communities safe. That'll keep kids safe as well. I want to remind us of the answer given today that shovels will be in the ground on the interim Northwest Busway this year, and that is fantastic work. It's great to get that confirmed today. We all know when the Northwest Motorway was widened, the rapid transit should have been put on then. I eagerly await more information, but let's not look backwards on this stuff. Let's look forwards, and let's look to how this is really going to improve places like Massey, Kumu, Te Atatu and all the rest. Finally, I want to say that I was speaking in Ranui Primary last week about the importance of reading to that assembly, and that was a really special moment for me. The fact is, public libraries as a kid got me where I am today. That is why I'm here today. And I'm so proud that we're cutting library funds for low-income communities like Ranui. That's fantastic work. So I'm so glad to endorse this budget. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and Councillor Richard Hills.
Thank you, Mayor, and congratulations to you and Councillor Simpson for bringing us together, and everyone for the phenomenal amount of work, especially the staff. But I do want to thank, even on an equal measure, our community. Our community over-consulted continuously. It's a conveyor belt. We're about to start the annual budget, next week, for next year. People continue to give us feedback, good or bad, and it's only now there are projects that people see why they like to give us that feedback. I just wanted to give a quick number of points. When I was elected to this governing body, 2016, we had a budget that was 18.6 billion, the LTP. So, 2 LTPs later, it's a 70% increase on that. More than 3 times the amount of water infrastructure is going to be built in this LTP.
Thank you.
Almost 91% increase on parks and community capital infrastructure. On the transport, it's another 50% increase on that LTP. So although last week was pretty frustrated, angry about our emissions, about the delays to some very important projects, we must also acknowledge where we've come from. The other thing that I do want to acknowledge is the collegiality and the working together. That does not mean we all agree. That might not mean we're all voting in favour of this. But I will say, watching this council and conversations and budgets before I was on this, it was quite often quite a depressing place to sit and listen and watch. There was quite a lot of vitriol at times, and there was a lot of arguments, and often the votes were very down the line. Even last term, there was quite a bit of to and fro that was quite difficult, and you left here feeling often quite despondent. So this term, I feel we've all worked together, and with our local boards and Independent Māori Statutory Board and the staff, in a much better frame of mind. And I think that's what we need to keep building on to ensure that we will be voting for things in this budget that we don't agree with, but to get as many things over the line as possible that we do agree with, we have to work together. On the climate, obviously disappointing with the RLTP, and there's a lot more work to do with the emissions reduction plan, and everyone seems up for it and is getting that message. But just on the 152 million amount of funding from in our budget, I couldn't imagine that 6 years ago, maybe not even 3 years ago, getting that sort of investment into other climate initiatives, whether that's rolling out our emissions-free bus plan, whether that's 200 hectares of new native forests, 11,000 more street trees focused on areas which don't have that urban tree canopy that I'm so lucky to have in my ward. More than doubling our recycling centres and resource recovery parks, which will hopefully mean no more landfills in our future. There is significant investment that we're putting in, and it's just a start, but I think it is significant. I want to thank both the Mayor, Desley, and all of you for supporting those initiatives that we can build on as we go forward. So although some days I'm annoyed, but I look at, even the natural environment targeted rate, the significant track work that's happening in Kaipātiki, the Waitakares, Hunua, that are opening almost month on month. There's new tracks opening around our city. The water quality work is significant, Eastern and Western Isthmus, but we've also got the Waido Estuary on there that we will see. Pump stations for all across the city are getting done that have been left behind, and that will help growth, but also help reduce those overflows into our waterways. The significant increase in the budget for Auckland Unlimited and all our theatres and stadiums, the zoo. Also look at the museum is opening significant exhibition spaces. And I think that when you look at what is happening and what can be done by working together, we just need to do more of it. And in my opinion, a lot faster, especially in the climate space. But I will obviously definitely support this because it's travelling in the right direction. I can be disappointed on some issues, but I'm actually fairly happy with where we're heading and what we've all done together, considering how hard last year was, especially for our community and our staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you all the councillors that have contributed, and thank you even more to those that haven't contributed today. I know everybody had something that they'd like to say about that. Look, I just want to start off saying, we're a year and a quarter out from the start of COVID, and actually, if we think back to where we were a year ago, we were all contemplating just how grim a year we had ahead of us. It looked shocking. We had the prospect of a virus running through our community, killing people, hospitalising people, overwhelming our health system. We had the prospect of huge economic damage. This time last year, we were talking about, whether we'd be having 10 or 20% unemployment. And I'm not saying it hasn't been a tough year. It has been a tough year, but it could have been a really grim year. And warning, it could still be if we were to fall into the hole that our friends in Melbourne have, for example, with a number of very serious lockdowns. this was always going to be a tough budget. We started off with a $1 billion hole in what we were trying to do. You know, that's $1 billion of dreams that we weren't able to realise. Worse than that, it could have been $1 billion of services that we slashed and capital works projects that were just delayed indefinitely, mothballed. And we didn't end up in that situation. And I want to thank all colleagues around the table, but also our officers, also the local boards. 20 out of 21 supported this. They're pretty close to the ground. Nobody welcomes ever when your rates go up, but they heard the arguments, they saw the evidence, and they knew that if you didn't have some level of rate increase, then it would be slashing services and it would be closing down capital works. And they chose not to do that, and we've chosen not to do that. We've chosen not to go down the austerity path. And we have worked collaboratively together. We've heard the evidence, we've looked at the scenarios, and we've come to the conclusion that what we are putting forward here is the best option in the circumstances. As Councillor Simpson said, it's not perfect. You know, I don't think we'd ever get it perfect, but just think of what we might have done with another $1 billion, or $750 million where it's come from. We've had elements of light along the dark pathway. We won the America's Cup, even if they are going to take it overseas to defend. We won the World Cricket Cup. We won the Trans-Tasman Cup, and we became the most livable city, not because we'd got on top of congestion, certainly not for that reason, but we had got on top of COVID, and we were living pretty normally and pretty well as a city. So what I guess I'm setting out here is we can always look at how bad things are in life, and we can depress ourselves mightily, or we can look at, actually, this is a great city, this is a great little country to live in, and we've done remarkably well, and that's the way that I'm looking at it. You know, what is really special to me is that while we have found savings, ongoing savings now of 90 million a year, 120 million in the current financial year, we have not slashed the sort of services that Councillor Casey was talking about, the library services. We haven't slashed the things that Auckland values, and most importantly, we have continued to invest in the capital works that a growing city, and we're still projecting 22% growth during this LTP, that a growing city desperately needs. This long-term plan, we're investing $31.8 billion in capital works. That's up from $26.2 billion. That is a 21% increase in the capital investment we're making in a 3-year period. And sure, you know, I'd like to have done a whole lot of other things, but keeping that sum of investment there, keeping our economy going, preparing for the future that we need to prepare for with growth and for our kids, that is a huge achievement. Won't make a newspaper headline anywhere because it's not controversial enough. But is it good? It's better than good. It's really bloody good that we can still invest that sum of money after years and years of underinvesting in our infrastructure. So I really welcome that. I welcome the fact, and I think Councillor Cooper, you mentioned it, about the renewals and the maintenance. You can't have assets and not maintain them properly. And we've got $55 billion worth of assets that we have to maintain, that we have to provide depreciation for, and that we have to operate. $55 billion worth of assets. And we're doing that, though there are challenges that we know that we're going to have to meet, particularly in areas like community facilities. We're looking at the Three Waters reform at the moment, but what we know is that without any reform, we're putting $4 billion more into ensuring the resilience of our water supply, the quality of our water supply, the quality of our water treatment. We're going ahead with the central interceptor that'll stop 80% of the wastewater overflows into the Western Isthmus area. That's great. We're on track with our city rail link, and it's just great to see that progress that's being made. So let's look at those things as well. Let's look at the fact that by bringing forward $900 million in CapEx, we've done our role in stimulating the economy. That's why it's called a recovery budget, because that's what it's about. I want to just acknowledge the water quality targeted rate and the natural environment targeted rate. We went out to talk to people and said, what things are really important to you? And they said, we want to protect our environment and we want to improve our water quality. And they gave us the green light. We didn't decide that by ourselves. Our constituents gave us the green light to do that, and that is fantastic. Some of what we've done, we've pulled every lever we had to. We've borrowed a bit more. But we've been cautious about that. We've set ourselves an upper limit of 290% debt to revenue ratio. In this budget, we're sitting on 274%. So why aren't we taking it to the whole limit? Well, largely because we don't know what's around the corner. We don't know what the outcome of some of those uncertainties will be. And we are going to be prudent in making sure we've got that freeboard that will enable us to deal with another crisis should it come along. And that's smart, and that's what we should be doing. Rates, you know, always tempting to say, gosh, we could do so much more, and it's only going to cost, you know, this 5% increase. It's only $38 a year more than the 3.5%. The whole 5% is $147 a year. That's not much, but it is for some people. It is for some people, and that we've got to think about the lowest income of our earners and making sure that we're not overburdening them. I think we've got the balance right in this. I just want to maybe finish on climate change. It is 152 million more, that's great. Could we have spent double that amount or treble that amount? Of course we could have, and we will need to. Because we've had the COVID crisis doesn't mean to say the climate change crisis hasn't gone away. And we will, in the coming year, need to look at that again, depending on, you know, if we make sure we haven't got another massive lockdown and a massive loss of revenue, we're going to have to look at ramping up our efforts. But with the 22% growth in population in this city, the starting point is that we've already, for the first time, probably ever in our history, lowered the rate of carbon emissions. Have we lowered it enough? Nowhere near enough. We're going to have to do a whole lot more, and that's where the congestion question is going to come in, and that's where getting the mode change is going to come in. All of those things have got to happen, and that challenge will not go away. We will need to ramp up our efforts to respond properly to it. So I just want to say it's great that we've got an unqualified opinion from the Audit Office. That shows the professionalism and the competence of our staff and the prudence of the approach that we are taking. This isn't a perfect long-term plan. It's not the long-term plan that I dreamed we might have 18 months ago, but it's a long-term plan that I think is a very I was going to say a workmanlike plan. I'm not allowed to say that, and I can't think of what the equivalent. Pippacoom, help me out. It's a very good plan that has professional,ism, and we've looked at the options. We've done the job that people pay us to do in this job. So I commend that to you, and I want to finish on this note of thanking Councillor Desley Simpson for the role that she's played as chair of the Finance Committee. It's been a tough job, and she's handled it well, and she's brought the team together. She's worked closely with me, and I think together we've done a pretty good job. I will just finish on this one point. You know, it's nice, some people will say we don't want to have a 5% rate increase, but I don't hear any of those people also saying we should cut our capital projects more, we should cut our services more. I think we've got the balance right. I think it's a responsible budget. I think it serves the people of our city really well. I commend it to you. So the vote is, the recommendation is to adopt the recovery budget and with delegated authority for any minor editorial changes. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no.
No.
I declare that carried with 2 dissenting votes. Thank you very much for that. We come now to the final item on our agenda, which is item number 11, which is rate setting. And if I can ask Eric Wen and Andrew Duncan to come forward, I'm going to move this. I'm going to ask Councillor Simpson once again to second the resolution, and these are the recommendations. There's 24 recommendations here that implement our long-term plan for the first year, 2020-2021. And Andrew, am I asking you to introduce the item, please?
So this report asks that you set the rates for the 2021-22 year that you've agreed to in adopting the recovery budget 2021 to 2031. This sets the rates that are laid out in the funding impact statement in that budget.
Well, that's short. You caught me by surprise. Right. Once again, this has been discussed, debated, workshopped, consulted on, etc. But are there any fresh questions that people have of Andrew or Eric? If not, are there any comments that people want to make? If not, I'm going to, comments from councillors Walker and Darby.
So, just a comment, I'll be voting against aspects of this rate, particularly the accommodation targeted rate. I do understand that it's being suspended for a year, but this is the long-term plan, and frankly, it's not workable. It's unfair. It doesn't match the rate take with the area that benefits, or the part of council that benefits. And similarly, I object to the change in the urban rating area as it goes to parts of my ward, particularly because it is also unfair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Darby. Okay. Thank you. Can I suggest that I'll put the recommendation as a whole, but the area where people have indicated dissenting votes is recommendation A2, which covers the 5% rate, and it also covers the urban rating area. There is no recommendation on the accommodation provider targeted rate because we had that vote on the 27th of May. So that's not one of the recommendations. So, hang on, let me just look at this. Number 16 is to do with QMU wastewater targeted rate. I'm not sure why the ward member for Oiraki has an objection to that. But if I put the vote with agreement of the governing body as a whole, and then if you have a dissenting vote on A2, I will then accept your. I will record your vote against that. So, sorry, Councillor Mulholland.
Just the urban rating that I disagree with, and I won't be supporting, but I do support the 5%. So I'm not sure how you're going to split those. I can note it.
You just note that you're against that aspect of it, I think. Thank you. So I'll put the vote as a whole. First of all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
Against A2.
Okay, sorry. I'll carry the motion, and now I'll record dissenting votes, which I have from Councillor John Watson on A2, Councillor Wayne Walker on A2.
A2, please. Councillor Newman.
Councillor Newman.
A2.
A2, and Councillor Stewart on A2, and Councillor Mulholland on A2.
And Councillor Sayers on A2 and A9 as well.
A2 and A9 for Councillor Sayers.
Thank
Is
you.
that's the, okay. So the vote
Your Worship,
is...
I'm trying to get words out, but I've sent through mine.
Sorry, Councillor Fletcher, yes. We'll record, that's on A2 as well, I take it. Okay, Okay, so I'll declare it carried with those dissenting votes as recorded. And that there is no extraordinary business, so that brings us to the end of the extraordinary governing body meeting. I declare the meeting closed, and we are in time for lunch downstairs. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you who worked so hard on this long-term plan. Well done.